It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I first saw him. The kind of day where the air feels clean and possibilities seem endless. My apartment building stood tall against the backdrop of a city that never quite felt like home to me. 5 floors up without an elevator had seemed like a good trade-off for the extra space and lower rent when I signed the lease. But on grocery days, I questioned my decision-making skills. I'm Claire, by the way, 32, copywriter by day, amateur chef by night, and perpetually single despite my mother's best efforts to change that status. My friends describe me as witty but cautious, the one who always has a clever comeback, but rarely makes the first move. I've lived in this neighborhood for almost 3 years now, nestled between the artsy district and the financial sector, a perfect metaphor for my own divided interests. My daily life had fallen into a comfortable, if somewhat predictable rhythm. Mornings spent with coffee and my laptop, afternoons at the advertising agency where I work, evenings filled with cooking experiments or Netflix marathons. Weekends were for farmers markets, occasional museum visits, and brunch with friends who were increasingly coupled up and having children. I wouldn't call it loneliness exactly, more like a gentle awareness of space that could be filled. The kind of feeling that catches you off guard when you cook a meal that's too delicious not to share, or when you witness something beautiful and turn to comment to someone who isn't there. The grocery store where we met wasn't anything special, just your typical urban market with slightly overpriced organic produce and an impressive wine selection. I was there on a Friday evening, my canvas bags filled with ingredients for a risotto I'd been wanting to try. The store had that end-of-week energy, people picking up supplies for weekend gatherings or date nights. The soft indie music playing overhead mixed with the beeping of checkout scanners created a strangely soothing soundtrack. I was examining avocados when I felt someone reach beside me. "The trick is to press gently near the stem," he said, demonstrating on one of the avocados. "If it gives just slightly, it'll be perfect tomorrow." I looked up to see a man about my age with dark curly hair and eyes the color of honey. He wore a simple blue button-down with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that suggested he did more than sit at a desk all day. His smile had a lopsided quality that made it seem like it was reserved just for you. "I've been doing it wrong all these years," I replied, returning his smile. "I usually just squeeze them until the produce manager gives me dirty looks." He laughed, and the sound made something warm unfurl in my chest. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "Claire," I responded, shifting my basket to shake his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and he held on just a moment longer than necessary. Our conversation continued as we moved through the produce section, discovering we shared a love for cooking and an inability to follow recipes exactly as written. There was something effortless about talking to him, like we'd known each other in some previous life. When I mentioned my 5th-floor walk-up and the impending climb with my groceries, he offered to help without hesitation. "I'm headed in that direction anyway," he said, though I suspected that might not have been entirely true. "Besides, I've been skipping the gym lately. Consider it my workout for the day." Under normal circumstances, I would have politely declined. I'm not usually one to accept help from strangers, no matter how charming their smile or how genuine their avocado advice. But something about Ethan felt safe, and the thought of making 4 trips up and down those stairs was particularly unappealing that day. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble," I said, trying to sound casual while my heart did a little skip. We paid for our groceries, his purchase surprisingly modest, just a bottle of wine, some cheese, and bread, and headed out into the early evening air. The walk to my apartment was only about 6 blocks, but it felt both too short and impossibly long. The conversation flowed naturally as we navigated the busy sidewalks. "So what brought you to this neighborhood?" he asked, shifting my heaviest bag to his other hand. "A combination of affordability and proximity to good coffee," I answered. "What about you? Do you live nearby?" "About 10 minutes in the other direction. I've been there about 5 years now. Moved for a job and stayed because it started to feel like home." As we walked, I learned that Ethan was an architectural engineer who worked on restoring historic buildings. He had a dog named Buckley, played recreational soccer on weekends, and had recently taken up pottery to have something to show for my time besides digital renderings. There was something refreshing about his openness, the way he shared details of his life without the careful curation that dating apps had made so common. "What about you?" he asked. "What does Claire do when she's not squeezing avocados inappropriately?" I told him about my copywriting job, my collection of vintage cookbooks, and my recent attempt to learn Spanish through a language app. I'm currently on a 20-day streak, but I can only reliably ask where the library is and tell people I have 3 cats, which is a lie. I don't have any cats. His laughter echoed off the buildings around us. That's a very specific and useless lie to be able to tell in another language. I'm hoping it's a conversation starter. People might be intrigued by my mysterious cat situation. By the time we reached my building, I was secretly grateful for each red light that had extended our walk. The stairwell was narrow, forcing us to climb single file, which gave me a moment to catch my breath and wonder what exactly I was doing inviting this man into my apartment. It wasn't something I normally did, but nothing about this encounter felt normal. When we finally reached my door, I fumbled with my keys, suddenly aware of how my apartment might appear to a stranger. It wasn't messy, but it was lived in, with books stacked on the coffee table and a half-finished painting propped on an easel by the window. Another hobby I'd recently taken up. Home sweet home, I said, pushing the door open and flicking on the lights. You can just set those bags on the counter. My apartment was a 1-bedroom with an open floor plan, the kitchen flowing into a small dining area and living room. Large windows faced west, catching the last of the day's sunlight. Plants crowded the windowsills, my attempt to bring life into the space. Ethan set the bags down and looked around with genuine interest. This is a great space. Those windows are amazing. They're what sold me on the place, I admitted. Worth the stair climb, most days. There was a moment of awkward silence as we stood in my kitchen, the grocery bags between us like a barrier neither of us was sure how to cross. I should thank him and send him on his way, I thought. That would be the sensible thing to do. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Would you like a drink? As a thank you for your grocery carrying services." His smile brightened. "I'd like that. Water is fine." I was thinking something stronger, I said, pulling a bottle of wine from one of the bags. "Unless you need to be somewhere?" "Nowhere important," he replied, and the way he looked at me made it clear that right now, this kitchen was exactly where he wanted to be. I poured us each a glass of wine, and somehow, unpacking groceries became an activity for 2. He handed me items from the bags while I put them away, our hands occasionally brushing in a way that sent little currents of electricity up my arm. We fell into an easy rhythm, talking about favorite meals and cooking disasters. "You should see my spice drawer," I said, opening it to reveal a meticulously organized collection. It's the only truly organized part of my life. Ethan leaned in close to inspect it, his shoulder touching mine. "This is impressive. I can barely tell the difference between cumin and coriander." "That's culinary sacrilege," I teased, breathing in the subtle scent of his cologne. Something woodsy with a hint of citrus. As we unpacked, our conversation deepened. He told me about growing up in a small town in Michigan, being raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs, and how he'd been the first in his family to go to college. I shared stories about my childhood in the suburbs, my parents' amicable divorce when I was 12, and my brief stint living abroad after college. "I've always wanted to live overseas," he said, leaning against the counter. "What was that like?" "Terrifying and exhilarating," I answered honestly. Everything was new, the language, the customs, even grocery shopping was an adventure. It makes you see your own culture differently when you step outside of it. "That's what I love about old buildings," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "They're like time capsules of different cultures and values. The way people design spaces tells you so much about what mattered to them." There was something captivating about the way he spoke about his work, with genuine passion rather than rehearsed interest. I found myself wanting to know more about the buildings he'd restored, about his perspective on the world, about what made him offer to carry a stranger's groceries up 5 flights of stairs. The last item in the bag was a bar of dark chocolate with sea salt, my weekly indulgence. Ethan held it up with a raised eyebrow. "Essential grocery item," I explained, taking it from him. "Would you like some?" I never say no to chocolate. I broke off pieces for each of us, and as I handed him his share, our fingers touched again. This time, neither of us pulled away quickly. There was an acknowledgement in that moment, a mutual recognition of the connection forming between us. We moved to the living room, wine glasses and chocolate in hand. The conversation flowed effortlessly as the evening light faded and the city lights began to twinkle outside my windows. I learned that he loved thunderstorms but hated horror movies, that he could play the guitar but only knew songs from the 90s, and that he volunteered at a youth center teaching kids about architecture and design. "What about you?" he asked. "What's something people wouldn't guess about you at first glance?" I considered the question, taking a sip of wine. "I compete in trivia competitions. Very seriously. My team has won the city championship 3 years running." "That's both impressive and slightly intimidating," he laughed. "I feel like I should be careful what I claim to know around you." "You should," I agreed with a smile. "I'm particularly ruthless about geography and 80s pop culture." As the evening progressed, I became increasingly aware of the space between us on the couch. Not too close, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. The apartment felt different with him in it, less like the place I returned to after work and more like a home where meaningful conversations happened. There was a moment when the conversation lulled, and instead of feeling awkward, it felt comfortable. Ethan looked at me with those honey-colored eyes, and I felt seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. "I should probably be going," he said softly, though he made no move to stand. "Probably," I agreed, equally motionless. The air between us seemed to thicken with possibility. I was acutely aware of my heartbeat, the rise and fall of my chest, the way his gaze dropped briefly to my lips before meeting my eyes again. "Claire," he said, my name sounding different in his voice, "I'm really glad you needed help with your groceries today." "I'm glad you know so much about avocados," I replied, a smile playing at the corners of my mouth. He set his wine glass down on the coffee table and turned toward me more fully. "I'd like to see you again. Properly, I mean. Not just as your grocery Sherpa." I laughed softly. "I'd like that too." What happened next felt both inevitable and surprising. He reached out, his hand gently cupping my cheek, his thumb tracing a line along my jawbone. I leaned into his touch, closing the distance between us until our lips met in a kiss that started soft and questioning before deepening with shared certainty. His hands were in my hair, mine gripping the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. We broke apart, breathless, foreheads touching. The world outside my apartment windows had disappeared. There was only this moment, this man, this unexpected connection that had begun among produce and culminated on my couch. "I've never done this before," I whispered against his lips. "Kissed someone," he teased gently. "Invited a stranger into my home." Felt this immediate connection. His eyes were serious now, searching mine. "I don't feel like a stranger, though. Does that sound crazy?" "No," I said, realizing the truth of it. "It doesn't." What followed was a dance of discovery, his hands finding the curve of my waist, my fingers tracing the line of his shoulders. We moved from the couch to the kitchen counter, where he lifted me as if I weighed nothing, setting me on the cool granite as he stood between my legs. The juxtaposition of the cold surface against my thighs and the heat of his body against mine created a delicious contrast that made me gasp. His lips found my neck, trailing kisses down to my collarbone while my head fell back, eyes closed in surrender to sensation. There was an urgency to our touches now, a hunger that had been simmering since that first moment in the grocery store, now boiling over into something that couldn't be contained. "Is this okay?" he murmured against my skin, always checking, always making sure. "More than okay," I assured him, pulling him back to my lips. The kitchen counter where we'd unpacked groceries became the setting for unpacking something else entirely. Layers of pretense and protection that usually took weeks or months to dismantle. There was something freeing about the spontaneity of it all, the pure chemistry that defied conventional dating timelines. Later, much later, we lay tangled in my sheets, the city lights casting patterns across the ceiling. His fingers traced lazy circles on my bare shoulder as I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "So," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, "about that proper date." I laughed, the sound vibrating between us. "You don't think this was proper enough?" "Well, we did things a bit out of order, didn't we? Usually dinner comes before dessert." I propped myself up on my elbow to look at him, taking in the relaxed smile on his face, the way his hair curled against my pillowcase. "I've never been very good at following recipes exactly as written." "That makes two of us," he said, pulling me back down for another kiss. The morning brought soft light and the scent of coffee brewing. Ethan had insisted on making breakfast, rummaging through my newly stocked refrigerator to create something he called morning after frittata. I sat at the counter, wrapped in my robe, watching him move through my kitchen with surprising ease. "You know," I said, accepting the mug of coffee he handed me. "When I went grocery shopping yesterday, I definitely didn't expect this outcome." "Life's full of surprises," he replied, cracking eggs into a bowl. "Especially in the produce section." We ate breakfast by the window, talking about everything and nothing. Our favorite books, places we wanted to travel, childhood memories that had shaped us. When he finally had to leave for his soccer game, there was none of the awkwardness I'd feared. He kissed me at the door, a promise in the gentle pressure of his lips. "I'll call you later," he said. "Maybe we can do that proper date tonight." "I'd like that," I replied, already looking forward to seeing him again. After he left, I moved through my apartment, touching the places where he had been. The counter, the couch, my bed. Everything looked the same but felt different, as if the space had absorbed some of the energy of our connection and now hummed with possibility. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Just realized I never actually got your number. The universe conspired to bring us together once. Don't want to test its patience a second time." I smiled, typing my reply. "The universe, or your knowledge of perfectly ripe avocados?" His response came quickly, both powerful forces. "See you at 7. "I'll be here," I wrote back. No need to bring groceries this time. As I set my phone down, I looked around my apartment, the same space I'd lived in for years but somehow transformed by one unexpected encounter. The grocery bags had been neatly folded and placed in a drawer, the wine glasses washed and put away, but evidence of our connection remained in less tangible ways. Sometimes life surprises you. Sometimes a simple offer to help with groceries leads to something profound. And sometimes, just sometimes, the journey from the produce section to your kitchen counter becomes the first chapter of a much longer story, one I was suddenly very eager to read. Total _char_count. 18,462.